So last week I talked all about Andrew Wakefield, particularly what a jerk he is, and how it was his poor science that led to the current anti-vaccination movement. And of course that he was recently discredited by the General Medical Council, and his original paper was retracted by the Lancet, which pretty much ruins the foundation of the anti-vax crowd. Well, that is, if they bothered to look at the real world and logic and things like that. Because I don't want to belabor the point, but I really need to address this letter that Jenny McCarthy and Jim Carrey supposedly wrote themselves. Basically, what it does is it defends Wakefield, but of course not using facts because they don't really have those. And they don't bother to explain away his behavior, like giving lumbar punctures to developmentally disabled children who don't need them and without ethics approval. No, they don't bother to tell us why he did that. But instead, they just shout that it was censorship, that Wakefield's simply being censored. And so I thought that might be a good excuse for us to talk a little bit about censorship using Wakefield as an example. Back in 2004, there was a documentary called MMR, What They Didn't Tell You. And the documentary starred Brian Deere, Sunday Times reporter, who had done an intensive investigation into Wakefield's practices over the previous few years. And so this documentary summed up all of his findings. And his findings are basically exactly what the General Medical Council recently found at the end of their 2-year-long inquiry. So when this went to air, obviously Wakefield was not happy, but there's really not a lot he can do about it when it comes to facts. So because he couldn't meet Brian Deere and his other detractors head on, he decided to try to shut them up. And he did this using the English High Court. You see, for those of you who don't know, I moved to England recently. Despite the accent, I am now here in London. And I was really shocked to discover that England doesn't have the same free speech as we have in the States. And in fact, it's known as the libel capital of the world because it's so easy to sue someone for libel, or at least just to threaten to sue them in order to shut them up. The reason why that works is because it's incredibly expensive to defend against a libel case, and it can be really difficult to prove your side, to defend yourself. So Wakefield sued Brian Deere as well as Channel 4, and he went on for 2 years before eventually dropping the suit. And during that time, he racked up £1.3 million in legal bills. And the thing is, he wasn't even paying for it. It was paid for by the Medical Protection Society, so it didn't really matter to him. But the thing is, it mattered quite a bit to people like Brian Deere, because if Brian Deere were to lose this libel case, then he would be responsible for paying all of Wakefield's legal bills. So most people, when faced with a libel threat like that, would just give up. They would just issue an apology, they would retract their statement, and the criticism would never air. And there's a very good chance that that's what Wakefield wanted. But instead, Channel 4 and Deere fought the battle. They spent a lot of money that they weren't guaranteed to recoup. Even if you win a libel case, chances are your entire legal costs won't be paid by the person who brought the suit against you. In his judgment, the justice on the case actually wrote that Wakefield had never had any desire to follow through on the proceedings, and that he was just using the trial as a weapon in his attempts to close down discussion and debate over an important public issue. So yeah, that's what censorship is really all about. But the good news is you can do something about it. If you go to libelreform.org, you'll find a petition that you can sign encouraging England's leaders to finally change libel laws for the better, to make them less expensive, to help people defend themselves, particularly scientists and writers and other people who are just being critical, who are being open about their criticism and engaging in an open debate and are being shut down for it. You can also send a letter to your MP through the libelreform.org website, And if you're not in England, sign the petition anyway, because we need as many signatures as we can, and it affects you. You might not know it, but if you say anything, for instance, online, if you write something that someone else claims is defamatory, they can take you to court in England if only one person here happened to read it. Even if you're not here, even if they're not here, they can still sue you here. So help stop England from being the libel capital of the world and protect free speech. libelreform.org. Thanks, guys.